Word traveled fast across the stars. By the end of the month, Evelyn Kane had become a name and a warning. Her image appeared in student handbooks, campus feeds, even memes on the Galactic net. Most showed her seated, unbothered, while the arm of a Krathian twisted grotesquely beside her. Some showed flames behind her, others storm clouds. She ignored them all. Evelyn walked the academy corridors alone, not because she had to, but because it was easier. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Eyes dropped, pads cleared. She didn't care. She wasn't here for friends. She was here for a degree. Xenthos Academy, with its pristine towers and utopian ideals, had finally been reminded that danger wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it wore a neutral expression and studied molecular astrophysics between classes. The Krathians, however, weren't done. 2 weeks after the tribunal, a formal delegation arrived from their homeworld. No one said it aloud, but the tension surged across the entire orbital station. Security tripled overnight. Rumors bloomed like fungus. Evelyn was summoned once more, not to a tribunal, but to a diplomatic arbitration. Again, she muttered, stepping into the cold-lit chamber. This time, she wasn't surprised to see that the Krathian ambassador was joined by 2 others, armored and tall, their fronds tucked in tight coils. Military, not academic. Miss Kane, the lead arbiter, greeted her. The Krathian delegation has concerns. About what? She asked flatly. The fact I'm still breathing? The ambassador hissed. You have embarrassed our culture before the galaxy. You embarrassed yourself when your professor laid a hand on me. He was a scholar. He was a fool, Evelyn said. And lucky I only broke bone. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was heavy. Like the room knew she wasn't bluffing. One of the Krathian soldiers finally spoke. Your kind lacks hierarchy, order. You act with violence because you don't understand respect. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. On Earth, we have a saying. Respect is earned, not inherited. Maybe your professor should have started there. The arbiters said nothing. They didn't need to. Her record spoke volumes. No disciplinary actions. Top 5% of her class. No acts of aggression before or after the incident. The Krathian delegation left, snarling threats of formal protest. Evelyn walked out and didn't look back. Later that day, she found Yiren waiting at her door. His body glowed with soft blue pulses, a sign of cautious optimism. You heard? She asked. I always hear, but I also listen. She leaned against the doorway. You know they're not going to stop. They'll push until someone else gets hurt. Maybe, he said, but maybe they won't push you. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. You're not afraid of me anymore. I still am, he said honestly, but fear isn't the same as avoidance. Where I come from, we're taught to avoid pain. You've shown us pain can be a lesson. She blinked. You're saying I taught the galaxy something? I'm saying they've never had to learn this lesson before. There was a pause. Then Evelyn cracked the smallest smile. I'm not a monster, Yiren. I know, he said. You're just from Earth. The semester progressed. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. A few students started asking her questions during group assignments. One brave soul even asked to spar, with non-lethal settings, of course. Evelyn obliged. She never struck first, never intimidated. But she didn't hide, either. She became a myth grounded in reality. And the academy changed, even if it didn't admit it. By the final exam cycle, her professors addressed her with respect. Not fear, earned respect. One even asked her to co-author a paper on cross-species conflict resolution. She titled it, Restraint Under Pressure, the Deathworlder Paradox. It was published in 3 systems. And Professor Inzek? He never returned to teaching. Rumor had it, he took a sabbatical on a low-gravity moon. Some said his fronds still twitched when he heard the word Earth. On her final day before departure, Evelyn stood by the viewing port, looking out across the stars. Yiren joined her. You changed things, he said. No, she replied. They changed when they realized I could have broken all of them, but didn't. Will you come back? Maybe, she said, shouldering her pack. Depend if the galaxy learns to sit still and listen. She walked away, calm as ever. The legend of the seated human who shattered bone without standing lived on, etched into Xenthos Academy history forever. Galactic outrage and human calm. Xenthos Academy hadn't seen this much political turbulence in centuries. The footage went viral within hours. Evelyn Kane, a Deathworlder girl from a backwater planet on the Galactic rim, calmly breaking a professor's arm without even standing up. No rage, no shouting, no dramatic outburst, just clinical, controlled power, and then she resumed her notes. The Galactic feed spun like a cyclone. Human female maims professor in classroom attack. Cultural weapon or psychopath. Deathworlder restraint? Analysis from a Krowlin tactician. Is humanity a threat to educational institutions? Evelyn sat in a holding room while this unfolded, monitored by 2 security drones and 1 deeply nervous academy counselor who kept his back to the wall and his hands visible at all times. She wasn't in a cell. They didn't dare. Instead, she sat quietly with her tablet open, reviewing quantum ethics notes. When they finally brought her to the tribunal hall, she stood tall, hands behind her back, expression unreadable. The tribunal consisted of 7 members, each from a different species, each chosen for neutrality. Their eyes, if they had eyes, watched her with calculated interest. Except for one, a Scarn delegate who trembled slightly when Evelyn met their gaze. The Krathian ambassador was present as well. He demanded her expulsion. The recording was played in silence. The moment of the snap rewound 3 times. When the footage ended, the room was still. Miss Kane, the lead arbiter, began. You are aware this academy is governed by Interstellar Educational Concord 17.3. Physical harness staff is considered a level 5 breach of conduct. Yes, Evelyn said. I'm also aware that faculty physically assaulting students is a level 6 breach. A murmured ripple spread through the observers. Your professor, the arbiter continued, was taken to the regenerative chamber with 3 shattered joints, 1 torn ligament cluster, and multiple microfractures. His nervous system is destabilized. Evelyn's tone didn't change. If I wanted him paralyzed, I'd have used my left hand. Another ripple. This time, mixed with something new. Respect. The Krathian ambassador rose, fronds twitching in fury. This human demonstrates no remorse. That was a cultural figure. He grabbed her, interrupted a neutral delegate, after multiple provocations. And the footage confirms he was warned. Do you expect us to accept this? Restraint? The ambassador spat. I expect you to learn from it. Evelyn replied coolly. Because if that's what you think of as violence, then you don't understand what a Deathworlder can do. The Krathian opened his mouth again, but the arbiter raised a hand. Miss Kane, he said, you are not being charged with assault. Your response falls within self-defense protocols. However, you are now under scrutiny by the Galactic Academic Review Board. Do you understand? I do, Evelyn said. Then you're released with no disciplinary action. You may resume your studies. The Krathian ambassador stormed out. Back in her dorm, Evelyn stared at the wall while galactic news feeds exploded across the known systems. Alien students now whispered her name in every corridor. Some avoided her entirely. Others asked for interviews. A few offered to be her friends, as if proximity might grant them protection. But Evelyn knew better. They weren't friends. Not yet. Except Yiren. He approached her in the library 2 days later, his normally soft ripples flickering with hesitant colors. May I sit? She nodded. I watched the footage, he said quietly. Over 100 times. Let me guess, she said. Still think I'm overreacting? No, he replied. I think I finally understand. Understand what? He hesitated. That you weren't angry. You were calculating. Focused. A Krathian limb has 7 vulnerable points. You targeted 3. That wasn't instinct. That was anatomy training. I took xenobiology, Evelyn said. I don't hit things I don't understand. That's how you end up dead. Yiren's body shifted again. Our kind. We don't train for violence. Then you're prey, she said simply. They sat in silence for a long while. Around them, students walked in wide arcs, whispering, watching. Yiren eventually asked, was it worth it? Evelyn stared at her reflection in the polished tabletop. No, she said. But it was necessary. Professor Rinzek didn't learn. The day after the confrontation, Evelyn returned to class as if nothing happened. She greeted no one, made no comments, and took her seat in the second row with her tablet resting across her lap. The only sign that yesterday had rattled anyone was the strange silence that hung in the room, like the air itself didn't want to move. Every eye followed her, but no one dared speak, not even Yiren. Then the door hissed open, and Rinzek entered. He looked brittle, more so than usual. His posture held that distinct stiffness of someone who'd lost face but refused to admit it. His eyes, deep black discs set in chitinous sockets, flicked briefly toward Evelyn, then away. He didn't greet the class. He just began the lecture in a clipped, irritated tone. As we discussed yesterday, he began pacing across the front. Certain primitive species confuse aggression for cultural complexity. Let us turn now to how true civilizations evolved beyond such base instincts. The jab wasn't subtle. Evelyn didn't respond. She barely blinked. As the lesson continued, Rinzek projected several cultural flowcharts on the holoboard. Each chart depicted major galactic civilizations, how they developed language, philosophy, and diplomacy. Evelyn's people weren't on any of them. Of course not. When he asked for analysis, he called on every student except her. The other students seemed relieved. Even Yiren remained unusually quiet, his gelatinous form faintly rippling with unease. It wasn't until the final 15 minutes that Rinzek struck. He turned to the class and said, "For your next reading assignment, I've uploaded a comparative report between pre-space Krathian moral law and," he paused, smile widening maliciously, "a series of Terran war crime transcripts." A few students squirmed. Others smirked. Evelyn didn't flinch. "That's not cultural study," she said, not looking up. "That's bait." Rinzek turned toward her with calculated calm. "Are you refusing the assignment, Miss Kane?" "No," she said, scrolling through the download. "I just think you're confusing curriculum with character assassination." He walked toward her, slowly, deliberately. The class grew still. "This is my classroom," he said. "You are a guest here." "And yet I was invited," she said softly. "That must sting." Gasps echoed from a few of the more sensitive species. Rinzek stopped directly in front of her desk. His breathing changed. "Stand up," he said coldly. Evelyn didn't move. "No, stand up. I don't take orders from people who need a medic after falling downstairs." Rinzek's limbs quivered. Something in him broke, temper, pride, or both, and in the blink of a moment, one of his long, narrow hands lashed out and grabbed her wrist. The class froze. Then it happened. A blur, a crunch, a sharp, wet snap that echoed through the lecture hall like a whip crack. Rinzek screamed, a shrill, unnatural noise as his arm bent backward at an impossible angle, multiple joints separating in a single fluid motion. And Evelyn? She was still seated. Her hand moved only slightly, wrist twisting, elbow locking, fingers guiding the movement. Precision. Efficiency. Like she practiced it 1,000 times. Her eyes never even left her tablet. The professor collapsed to the floor, writhing and howling, clutching the ruined remains of his upper limb. Evelyn set her stylus down and looked up for the first time. "I warned you," she said, her voice calm as still water. "You touched a Deathworlder. That was your first mistake." A beat of silence passed. No one moved. Yiren's emotional field was absolute chaos, panic, awe, fear. A few students had bolted from their seats. One was whispering into their comlink for security. Evelyn sighed. "I used minimal force," she continued. "Had I stood up, I'd be mopping what's left of you off the walls." Security bots stormed in, sleek, black, fast. But they didn't fire. They scanned, analyzed, froze mid-step. The footage showed everything. One warned Evelyn to remain seated. She already was. Rinzek was taken to the med bay, howling and cursing in 6 languages. Evelyn stayed behind, gently resuming her lecture notes like nothing had happened. Yiren leaned forward slowly and whispered, "Why didn't your heart rate increase? You were so calm." Evelyn gave him a tired glance. "Because if I let it rise, he'd be dead." Xenthos Academy orbited a pale blue gas giant in neutral space. It was an interstellar jewel, the crown of education for over 80 species. Generations of galactic elites earned their prestige in its halls. Not a single human had ever set foot inside it. Until now, Evelyn Kane stepped off the docking platform with the posture of someone used to predators watching her. Tall species, armored species, luminescent species turned to stare. A few whispered. She heard the clicks, hums, and untranslatable emissions. Translation implants took care of the words, but not the tone. Is that a human? She looks so small. They really sent a girl? Evelyn kept her stride steady, the slight weight of her backpack barely noticeable after the gravity training she endured on Earth. Everything here was sterilized, controlled, polished metal, and gleaming walls. So different from home. She exhaled slowly through her nose. This wasn't survival training. It was school. The student registrar, a towering serpentine being with 3 optical stalks, glanced her over and paused before scanning her ID. Human. Earth, it muttered. Species, Deathworlder. Evelyn offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That's us. Sorry in advance. Her first week went mostly as expected. Isolation. Stares. Whispers. No one sat beside her in the common dining sector. Even the cleaning drones gave her wide berth. But Evelyn didn't mind. She'd expected worse. At least no one had tried to dissect her. Yet, her biggest problem, though, was Professor Rinzek, instructor of interstellar sociocultural histories. A Krathian, thin and brittle-boned, with layered fronds for fingers and an ego to match his 6 degrees. He made his feelings about humans clear the moment she entered his class. Ah, he had sneered, our first Deathworld curiosity. Try not to throw anything. Laughter, nervous and fake, rippled through the classroom. Evelyn had taken her seat without a word. Each lecture, Rinzek found a way to spotlight her in the worst possible light. Let's ask our war-evolved guest, he'd say, since Earth's culture appears to revolve entirely around violence and conquest. Evelyn, how do you justify your species' obsession with combustion weaponry? She'd answered flatly, we don't. But evolution on a planet that tries to kill you every 5 minutes makes you efficient. Oh, Rinzek said, faux pleasant. So barbarism is efficiency now. The other students watched these exchanges with a mix of discomfort and amusement. Few defended her. Most were content to see how far things would go. Yiren, a jelly-bodied empath from Vector, sat closest to Evelyn. He didn't say much, but sometimes he'd glance sideways at her, puzzled. Her emotional signals were quiet, too quiet, like something was tightly locked inside. It wasn't until the second week that Rinzek escalated. The lecture was about first contact ethics. The professor brought up Earth's history with colonization. Of course. Evelyn sat in her usual seat near the front, legs crossed, stylus idle. Miss Kane, Rinzek said, care to explain how Earth's primitive societies justified domination under the guise of progress? She gave a slow blink. Do you want a historical answer or a rhetorical spar? Whichever involves less snarling. A few students laughed. Evelyn didn't. Then you're not looking for an answer. You're looking for performance. Rinzek flared his fronds. Excuse me. I get it, she said, eyes still on her tablet. You feel threatened by the idea that a species evolved in a place your kind wouldn't survive an afternoon. So you punch down. It's not academic. It's personal. But I'm not here to comfort you. The silence in the room became taut. Students stopped breathing. Even Yiren's body quivered with emotional static. Rinzek stepped forward, too close, and slammed a long, cold digit on her desk. You will respect my class, little ape. Evelyn's eyes lifted. Calm. Icy. Her voice was steady. Don't touch me. He sneered. Or what? She said nothing. But Yiren, sitting behind her, felt something like the gravitational pressure in a room had suddenly spiked. He tasted it like ozone. That wasn't anger. It was control. Contained violence. Lethal restraint. Rinzek didn't notice. He leaned closer. And Evelyn, she didn't stand. She just smiled, ever so slightly, and let the silence answer for her.